Okay guys, the last way to display data that we need to talk about are box and whisker plots, but before we can talk about box and whisker plots, we have to talk about quartiles and something called inner quartile range. Okay, so we're going to start with identifying quartiles, and what this is we're going to break the data down into 4 sections, and that should make sense because the word quart in quartiles. So number 1 is the median, which you've already learned about, which is the middle of a set of data, divides the data into 2 equal parts. So it splits the data into 2, right in half. Okay? So the quartiles of a data set divides the data into 4 equal parts, like I said earlier, because of that beginning of the word being quart. Okay, the second quartile is the median of the data. Okay, so that means it equals the median. The first quartile is the median of the lower half of the data. The third quartile is the median of the upper half of the data. So when your data is split in half, you're going to have an upper part and a lower part. Okay, so your first quartile will be the middle of this upper part, and your third will be the middle of this lower part. Okay, it says the first quartile can also be called the lower quartile, and the third quartile can also be called the upper quartile. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and label the quartiles for the data given in number 8. Okay, so if we're going to find the median of these numbers, we have to be in order from least to greatest. Let's not forget that. But lucky for us, we already are in order from least to greatest, so now we need to find the median. So we have to mark off in pairs. So here's a pair, we move in, marking off a pair, and move in one more time. So this is our median. Okay, so 9 is the median, or quartile 2. Okay, so if we go down here to our steps, so step 1 is to find the median of the data. So we just did that, and this is quartile 2. And this has to be quartile 2 because quartile 1 is the middle of the lower half, like number 4 says, and the third one is the middle of the upper half. So quartile 1's down here, quartile 2 is up here, so quartile 1's down here, quartile 3 is up here. So quartile 2 is right here in the middle. Okay? So step 2 is to find the median of the lower half. And this will be quartile 1. Okay, so if your median of the data, quartile 2, is an exact number, it's one number, which if you remember means we have an odd number of numbers in our data. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 numbers. So we do only get one middle. So that means you're not going to include 9. So when we find the lower half, we're going to cover this side up. Okay, and then we're going to mark off in pairs, which means that 2 is the middle of the lower half, which is quartile 1. And then if we need to find the middle of the upper half, we cover this side and we don't include that median. And if we mark off in 2s, that leaves 20 as the middle of the upper half, which is quartile 3. So filling in this down here at the bottom, we would find the median of the upper half, which is quartile 3. Okay, so we find the median in the middle, which is 9 in this case. Then we find the middle of the lower half, which is quartile 1, and the middle of the upper half, which is quartile 3. Okay, so now we're going to look at number 10. And we're going to change this data up just a little bit because I want you to see what will happen if you have an even number of numbers in your data. Okay, So I'm going to add 10 to the end down here. Okay, so first we have to find the median. So up here, move it in, and there's our 2 in the middle. Okay, which means our median is going to be in between these two numbers. All right, so if you remember, you have to add these two numbers together. 6 plus 8, which gives us 14. Then you divide by 2, which gives us a median of 7. So that means here's our median, which is also called quartile 2. Okay? Now, when we have one number in the middle, we don't include our median, but if we have 2 in the middle, we have to include the left number with the left side. So this is the upper, and this right number with the upper, or the right side of the data, which would be this side, okay? So when looking at the lower, so we can find Q1, we want to cover up the right-hand side. So when we do this, we'll cover that up, and then we move in 1, and then we have 2 in the middle here as well, because we have 4 numbers. So now on the lower side of our data, our quartile 1 will be here. So we have to add 4 and 5 together to give us 9. And when we divide 9 by 2, we should get 4.5. So quartile 1 is 4.5. And this should make sense because, like, looking back at 6 and 8, 7 is in the middle of 6 and 8. And looking at 4 and 5, 4.5 would be in the direct middle of these two numbers. Okay? So now let's look at our upper half. So we take these two off. Then we have 9 and 9 in the middle. Okay? So our median would be there. Now, when we're looking at the same number, nothing would be in between 9 and 9 but 9. So quartile 3 is 9. But if you don't believe me, we go up here and say 9 plus 9. We do get 18. And 18 divided by 2 is in fact 9. Okay? So we have now learned how to find all 3 quartiles for a set of data. So now we need to flip over, and we need to talk about inner quartile range. Okay? So looking at this, or these words, there are a few things that we need to talk about. So you have to use quartiles to find inner quartile range, because you see the word quartile in inner quartile. But what this is it's the inside. So over the word inner, I'm going to write inside. It is that range of the inside of our data. Okay, so let's remember that range is the difference between the high and the low. So you take your highest number and you subtract your lowest number. Okay, so it's the inside range of our data. Okay, sometimes, or all the time, I'm going to refer to inner quartile range using IQR, just an abbreviation instead of writing all those letters down for those big words. Okay, so the IQR, inner quartile range, is a measure of variation. Just like range, we're still measuring the variation of our data. Okay, the difference between the third quartile and the first quartile is called the inner quartile range. So all that means is you're going to take quartile 3 and subtract quartile 1. And that's how we'll find inner quartile range. Number 3 says the inner quartile range can be abbreviated as IQR, as we've already said in the beginning. And 4 says the IQR represents the range of the middle half of the data. So all that means is you're taking what's closest together, that middle part of your data, and you're finding the range in between it. Okay? So 5 says a small inner quartile range means the data is close together. And 6 says a large inner quartile range means the data is spread out. To find the IQR, find all 3 quartiles. Then subtract Q1 from Q3. Okay? So just like finding the quartiles, we're going to find the median of the entire data set. And this is Q2, quartile 2. Then step 2, we're going to find the median of the lower half of the data, which is Q1. Then we're going to find the median of the upper half of the data. This is Q3. And then we're going to subtract Q1 from Q3. Okay? So you've already had some practice finding the quartiles. So the only thing new here is going to be finding inner quartile range. But we do have to start with finding our quartiles. So looking at the data, we're already in order from least to greatest. So we're just going to move in to find our median. So we mark them off in pairs. So this is gone, these are gone, these are gone. So we do have one number in the middle, which is 15. So 15 is quartile 2, which is our median. Okay? So now we want to cover the right side of the data, and remember, when we have one median, so there's not 2 numbers in the middle, that means we have an odd number of numbers. We don't include it. So we want to mark these 2 off, which means 12 is in the middle. So 12 is Q1, quartile 1. Looking at the upper half, we mark these 2. So 19 is the middle. So 19 is quartile 3. And so now that we found our quartiles, inner quartile range, IQR, is quartile 3 minus quartile 1. So if we look at our data, quartile 3 is 19 minus quartile 1, which is 12, which means our inner quartile range should be 7. Okay, and the way we can note inner quartile range is different from regular range, which we already learned how to find, is because range is a difference in the highest number and the lowest number. So if we look at our data, 20 is our highest number, 10 is our lowest number, and 20 minus 10 gives us a range of 10. So that's the difference in inner quartile range and range. And that's all there is to finding quartiles and inner quartile range. So now what I want you to do is you have a practice for identifying quartiles, and you also have a practice for identifying inner quartile range. Okay? So I want you to remember, always, 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 when we have to find the median, we have to order from least to greatest. So on our notes, they were already ordered, but they may not be on our practice. So I'm going to write that at the top of both of them so we don't forget. Okay, and then both of them say, if necessary, round to the nearest tenth. Okay, so if we remember, what that means is if you have a number, it will have your number, decimal, and a number. The 10th spot will be that number behind the decimal. So you're going to look at this number and see if we need to go up or down. Okay, and remember, if we're 5 or above, we give it a shove. If we're 4 or below, we let it rest. We keep it. Okay? So go ahead and get started on this practice now.